everyone. I'm Jo, and it's my pleasure today to welcome Georgina and Adrian, who are Wellbeing Managers here at the University of London. And they're with me here at Senate House. And I'm delighted to say we also have a computer science student, Kyle, who's joining us online from Malawi. Hello, Kyle.
Hi.
This is a special episode that we're recording ahead of World Mental Health Day, and that's on the 10th of October. And so what we'll be doing, we'll be talking about mental health, well-being, and hearing questions from students from around the world to help raise awareness, to challenge some mental health stigmas, that they still exist today, we know that, and to answer some questions that have been sent in. So I think we'll jump straight in and we'll welcome our three guests properly. So hello, Kyle.
Hi.
Hello, Adrian.
Hi.
And hello, Georgina.
Hiya.
Kyle, you kindly you've put together some questions and some perspectives for our experts here, Georgina and Adrian. And would you mind getting us started?
Of course. These questions are sort of personal to me. So it's easier to speak about these things. So I'm kind of hoping that there are people listening that sort of relate. So my first question was, it's about isolation. You guys, it's sort of well versed and well knowledge that we should speak out about our issues and our problems. But the second my mental health declines, I just isolate, right? There's a dissonance between sort of knowing that I should be reaching out, but I don't want to in the moment, right? I just wanted to know why that is and how can I sort of battle against it.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I feel like a lot of people are going to really resonate with that. I certainly have before, and I think there's lots of things that influence that. As we've kind of said in the intro, there's still a lot of stigma surrounding mental health, and it's progressed so much in the last 5 to 10 years. But there's also a lot of conversation around positivity and being sort of relentlessly positive, and that if you're not feeling that way all of the time, that there's something wrong with you as a person. And I feel like that kind of feeds into sometimes this thing of closing up and not reaching out straight away. It's a very vulnerable thing to do. And especially if you've been raised in an environment or you're in an environment where it doesn't feel safe to express yourself.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think actually for many of us, it's a really kind of natural instinct, when we're feeling unwell or hurt, to kind of want to roll up into a ball and just be alone. And I mean, especially for maybe the 30% of the population or so who, like me, are high in introversion, actually it really is a kind of a go-to behaviour. And actually, I think it's okay. It can be a helpful, adaptive thing to do in some circumstances. And I think it can maybe become problematic when we're not feeling better after a day or two of, having some alone time. And then we don't say, hang on, this isn't working. Maybe I need to reach out for some help at this point. So for me, I think it's about saying, okay, it's okay to have a duvet day. That's all right. That's allowed. But if I'm still feeling like this a few days later, maybe I need to try something else.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. All of us need different things at different times, and what we need changes over time as well, depending on what's going on. But I think also, like, feeding into that is there's a lot of focus at the moment on self-sufficiency and self-care, and not as much focus on the role of community and others in helping and healing. It is really important to have a support network. Humans haven't got this far and haven't survived through being alone. It's through helping each other, and it's a really natural thing to want to do as well. So maybe there's something there of, I feel like I shouldn't need any help because I've read all these things and I should be able to self-regulate and I should be able to heal on my own. So having that sort of knowing when, okay, I need some alone time, and knowing when actually I think I could do with someone to chat to, and that's okay.
I think sometimes knowing who you're going to reach out to and how can be helpful too, because when you're feeling rubbish, often it can be kind of one thing too much to have to not only think I'm going to reach out for help, but also think, oh, who and how and when. Maybe having a plan is a good strategy too.
Yeah.
It's interesting to know that it's sort of okay. I mean, I did touch on the fact that quite a lot of people are introverted. I would say I'm quite introverted. So to hear, it's okay to have that sort of reaction sometimes is good. It's good.
Do you find it difficult, Kyle, to actually speak and ask for help when you're feeling isolated?
I do, and it sort of touched on what Georgina was saying of I don't want to be seen as someone who is struggling, you know. It's sort of easier to, I don't know how to say it, but it's sort of easier to just deal with it myself in the background so no one has to see that I had to deal with it, sort of thing. But this will tie on to some of my other questions, but I don't want people to see me in a way that's sort of not exactly who I am, right? Because when I'm down, I don't think that that's the best version of myself, and I don't want to put myself across as you know, half of who I think I am.
That's so interesting, and I totally get that. And I've definitely been the kind of person who wants to sort of protect my image in some way. But there's also something to be said for accepting that part of yourself, and it is part of who you are. And when you're feeling low, that doesn't make you half of who you are. It adds to it. And I love this idea in life of paradoxes, and we have the light and we have the shadow, we have the highs, we have the lows, and that's what makes you a whole person. So being able to sort of to treat yourself more like a friend, like something that I find helpful is if I picture someone I really care about struggling and they're thinking, I don't want to be seen this way, and I don't want to be a burden, or whatever it is, that would make me feel really sad that they were going through that on their own, and I would want them to come and speak to me. And so I kind of, when I'm feeling low, I'll apply that to myself. I'll be like, I'm finding it really hard to chat, but I kind of know that I need to now, and I know that someone I care about would want me to and would accept me as that. And vulnerability is a strength. It's, you know, from a place of vulnerability, we not only accept ourselves, we also teach others that it's okay to be themselves as well. So there's something really inherently valuable about being able to open up a bit about how things are going and opening a conversation with someone else.
I think we all resonate with what you said, Kyle, and how you feel. Everyone feels they have to be performative, or they have to be this version that we all think that other people want to see us as. Because I'm an extrovert, but because of that, I feel that people expect that. So I maintain that even when I don't have those extrovert days. My natural personality is very extroverted. But of course, light and shade, up and down, I don't feel like that all the time. But I think it's expected of me, so I must be that Joe. So you have some other questions for us?
I've got loads. So I recently became a Talk Campus Buddy, which is a peer-to-peer sort of support group app, sort of the intermediary between casual conversation and like professional support. And I am someone who struggles with mental health. So I've had to take time off the app from listening to other people's mental health issues. And I just wanted to know, as people who deal with this, at a very higher level than me, if you are someone who people come to with their mental health problems, and you are someone who maybe is suffering yourself, or maybe the problems that they've come with are a little bit too heavy for you, how do you balance your own problems with theirs, and that sort of taxing feeling you get mentally?
It sounds Carl, like you're finding your way with this already. You've identified that there's time that sometimes you need to take time away from the role, and in a professional role, it's essential to establish boundaries and to be clear about what time you can give to either the role or to a particular client or person, or whatever term you use to describe the people you're supporting. And of course, it's so much harder to do that if you're supporting friends and family. But actually, the same principles apply. That it's okay to say, look, I can be here this time for this long, and I can't be here all the time, 24 hours a day. And I think it takes time to work out what your own boundaries should be, and it's a process for all of us. And I think alongside boundarying the work, it's also important to have a clear sense in your own mind of what activities you need to do to support your own well-being. And these are kind of routine things that you do all the time. And so I guess a good structure would be something like the 5 ways to well-being. You might have come across the 5 ways to well-being, which are to connect, be active, take notice, keep learning, and to give. And I could give an example from my own life, not as a prescription for anyone else's, but I guess as evidence that this is something that people really do. I have in my schedule every day, I have time set aside for reading, so I guess that's keep learning. Time for mindfulness meditation, which I guess would be to take notice, and time for the gym, which is keeping active. And I'm very fortunate that my everyday life gives me opportunities all the time to connect with other people, and to give to others. And for me, that's helps me continue in the role that I do.
It can be really easy when you're not taking enough notice to internalize other people's experiences as your own. And so something that I do when I leave someone I've been supporting is do things like I will journal afterwards, and I'm journaling to come back to myself and to separate what is mine and what is someone else's. Because being alongside someone is really important, but the key there is that you're alongside, you're in parallel, which means that there is a line between you and them. So it can be when you first start helping others, whether you're volunteering or anything like that, you have to learn that line of, I can know that I am in a good place, and I can also be alongside someone who isn't, and those things can exist together. So I might journal, I might sort of think in my mind, so I commute, so say if I'm getting the tube home, I might say, okay, when I go through this barrier, I've left the baggage there. That's there, I go through this barrier, and I come back to myself, and I do whatever I'm going to do.
And Kyle, when you take time on the app, and obviously we thank you for that, because the Talk Campus app is something that we're in partnership with for our University of London students to have access 24/7, 365 days a year, to reach out and to talk to others, and obviously to talk to professionals if need be. Obviously escalates, and somebody like yourself, who my understanding is you've done the counselling course so that you can support our students. So you're amazing for doing that. But know that also that when you're on that app, if you feel like you need help, that's okay. There are others there that will be able to help you. Do you find that difficult to do?
Yes, and that was sort of the preface of like my first sort of question, is if I'm someone who, because it tags me, right? I'm tagged as a buddy, so you can already tell that I'm someone who's been through the course. So to see a buddy asking for help was sort of my concern, really.
Well, in sort of like what I would kind of say to that is you're you're leading by example in that way. And a really important thing, if you are going to be helping others and volunteering your time in that way, is you have to be able to seek support yourself, especially if you're going through things and you're struggling. And, you know, on this podcast and in others, I'll disclose things that I've been through when they're helpful. And I think it's really powerful for someone in a position where they're in a helping role to be able to say, you know what, I struggle sometimes too. And we all do. You can be, you know, an absolute expert in your field and still struggle. So in terms of like having your tag there as buddy, if you can become a bit more comfortable with asking for your help yourself, people will see like, oh, look, he's this, but also he's this. And there's something really whole about that, and gives other people permission to be themselves and not mask so much.
And Carl, I just want to add that everybody that works in a wellbeing or mental health space has that sort of system in place where they have support. Just in this room alone, Adrian leads a working group where we come together regularly to share and support each other because we work in this space. And Georgina's obviously on the front line day to day with our students, and she speaks to Adrian for support and guidance, and we all do, and I know that you have that same support as well, don't you? So
no one in the room is a counsellor or a therapist, but if you are a counsellor or a therapist, you have to be in therapy yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to be in therapy and have a supervisor, someone you debrief with. So that was such a good thing to mention. We're all part of a group and we support each other. We're not here in our roles isolated and taking in some really difficult things from others and then not speaking about how we're doing as well. They have to coexist. That's what makes this work sustainable. Yeah.
I guess something else that may be relevant here is that one of my roles is as the warden of a student hall of residence. So I have 240 students whom I support particularly closely. And I think it was for University Mental Health Day, about 6 or 7 years ago, I made a video about my own experience of depression. And since making that video, the number of students who felt able to speak with me about their own experiences has been much higher, because they know that I'm not a kind of some bizarre alien being that doesn't experience difficult times too.
Yeah.
Would you like to ask another question to the panel?
Of course. So I've been down, and when I was really like the lowest point for me, I was seeking help. I didn't want to be in the position I was in, and I was seeking help, and it just wasn't for me. And I remember a line in a song, and I've even typed it out here, and the line is, they say every life is precious, but no one cares about mine. And that hit me. It resonated with me a little bit, because it's so easy to just say, if you're going through this helps. But it wasn't helping for me. It felt overgeneralized. It felt like maybe it helped some people, but it didn't help me in particular. So my question is, what do you do if you're in a position where you're seeking help, but it's not working?
Adrian, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I think there's so much to unpack here. And in a way, your experience, Kyle, speaks to the heterogeneity of the challenges that we experience with our well-being and of mental illness, and of the kind of the inadequacy, in a way, of medical science and language to describe and categorize and understand the unique individual experience that each of us has of whatever we're going through. And I think, maybe an example is that depression is one label that lots of people receive as a diagnosis, but actually what each of those people is experiencing is different and unique to the person. And a doctor might try 2 or 3 or 4 different tablets to treat depression, if that seems to be the right course of action for that person, before they find something that actually is useful. And the same could be applied to talking therapies and any other number of interventions for whatever condition someone might be diagnosed with. And that's before you even think about situations where maybe there isn't a diagnosis, maybe actually times are just really hard and this isn't a disorder as such. And I think your question also kind of highlights some of the tension between the fact that most practitioners in this space really do see their clients or patients as individuals, and they really do genuinely care for the people that they work with, but they're also working within systems where treatments and interventions have to be commissioned at a population level or at a community level, and on the basis of the best available evidence for the greatest number of people, and that by definition doesn't always work for every individual. So there are so many tensions here, and I think for me the message that should come out from your experience is that we should try to engage with the interventions and treatments that are available, but also be mindful that not every treatment or intervention is right for every person. There are alternatives, and to keep going back, keep knocking on that door until actually you find the thing that's going to work for you, because there will be something.
And to pick up on that and what you've been saying around, essentially different people need different things. And something that I found in my experience when I've experienced depression and anxiety is that I've had to try lots of different things. And while there is great guidance out there and things that people can recommend, it's also really worth bearing in mind that you are the expert on yourself. So you can have advice and recommendations and try things, and you will know what is working for you. And being able to seek some of those answers from yourself instead of relying on other people to know you better than you do. So I found that I had to try lots of different things. And say if we take exercise, and that's really good for your health. I tried lots of different things that did not work for me. I tried running, I tried HIIT workouts, all kinds of things, did not enjoy at all whatsoever. And then I decided to go for a swim, and that something shifted. I was like, oh, this is true. Moving your body is good for you, and it does feel good afterwards. But none of these ways I was doing before were good for me. So it could have been really easy for me to discount that as something that would work for me. And then I tried something and thought, oh, great. It can be really frustrating when all you want is to feel better and you want that to happen quickly. And sometimes it's not quick, and you've got to be really patient with yourself and try things out and be committed to that. And that can be really difficult, especially if you're not feeling motivated.
Kyle, I mentioned at the top of the podcast that you have written, you're a student blogger as well, and I know that you have written a blog, and actually hopefully we can tag that into the podcast when it goes out as well, on imposter syndrome, and I believe you have a question around that.
I do, and just to make sure everyone knows, imposter syndrome is the feeling of being perceived as a fraud or an imposter. So that would be maybe assuming that your fellow students think that you're smarter or more talented than you actually are. It's sort of, you feel like a fraud in your environment. And in my research for writing that blog, I came along some ways of sort of handling it, but I did want a more sort of professional sort of approach, and I think that a lot of students deal with this. So I think that it would be a good question to put in here, just to bring it to the attention, because there's probably someone listening who doesn't even know what imposter syndrome is, and they're probably going through it. So my question would just be for it is how do you deal with this sort of imposter feeling?
Yeah. So something that I found helpful is thought work and being able to challenge the thoughts that you might have. So if you're feeling like you're not deserving of where you are and that somehow you've gotten somewhere by total fluke, that every single thing you've done has been a massive mistake that no one's found out yet, that's incredibly unlikely. If we're talking about, for example, getting onto a program of study, you would have had to apply for that and you would have had to have that accepted, and that is based on your application. So being able to sort of, when you have these thoughts, just to be able to catch them and look at them and offer something different. So being able to say, oh, I have achieved this, or I've succeeded in this, and that is because I worked for it and I deserve to be here. So you don't necessarily, if it doesn't feel comfortable to be like, and this is because I'm amazing and I'm an expert and I'm all these things, it can just be, oh yeah, I worked hard on that and this is the outcome, rather than everyone else's judgment is wrong kind of thing. So yeah, thought work is something that I find helpful.
I think for me, the red flag that goes up to say, oh, I might need to challenge this, is when I start hearing absolutes, everyone, always, everything. It's very rarely true that everything, always, everyone. And I think that's the sign, oh, I need to dig into this. What's really going on? Is there really evidence that this is true?
Yeah, and the thing that is worth remembering, and that I often have to remind myself, is that when you're introducing more helpful thoughts to yourself and kinder ways of talking to yourself, it takes practice, because our automatic thinking, on a physical level in the brain, they're really well used pathways. So your brain might instantly go there because it's clear, it's been used so many times, you've had those thoughts so many times. So when you first start doing thought work, you can't just have a nice thought once and then be like, great, I'm sorted now, and I will always be kind to myself. It's practice and it's repetition, so that you begin to deepen those neural pathways, so that your instant thing isn't always the thing that's unhelpful, but starts to divert somewhere else. So if you can kind of keep that in mind, that actually there's a physical thing taking place in your brain in order to help you experience a more nourishing thoughts, then just bear that in mind. Just because you slip up once and maybe you go into your automatic thoughts that might be unhelpful, that doesn't mean you're regressing. You're still actively working on addressing those things.
Your brain gets down those unhelpful thoughts, like it's 70 miles an hour down the motorway, and then when you try bringing in some kinder reasoning, it's like trudging through a swamp in 30-year-old Wellington boots.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did write about was how common it is, and I think that there was a good sort of thing that not everyone is this sort of, everyone's feeling it, this, right? It's common amongst people, and for that reason, I wrote about treating it in a way that's it's sort of treated like a friend rather than an enemy, because it'll come over, and when it comes, just treat it as someone who you can prove, that I am actually good at this, right? So when this imposter syndrome feeling does come, it's like, hey, you're here again. Let me show you how good I actually am. Let me show you how I can do this, and take that as sort of your way of enjoying it, as proving your hard work, and that's how I personally have dealt with it, and that's how I think people should deal with it.
I think it can be really common for people who experience this feeling of being an imposter. Often they're quite high achievers already, and they have the credibility they need to be where they are. So just a caution around like this idea of proving oneself or saying, look, I'm going to be even better now because then I'll prove this voice wrong. That can lead to burnout, because sometimes the answer is, this is sufficient now, and I have already worked really hard, and I already have the qualifications I need, and I have already proved this wrong. So being able to discern when it's helpful to do more, or when it's helpful to say, thanks for that thought, I've come to the conclusion that I have actually done enough for this now, and then you can move on to something different. So just being aware of not burning out because you're always trying to be better than you already are. Sometimes you're just good enough.
Kyle, I think you have a couple more questions for the panel.
I did. I've got two more.
Okay, that's great.
And this one's about anxiety. It's the one I suffer with the most. I really struggle with social anxiety. But I mean, it should be something that a lot of students do feel anxiety, especially University of London students, right? If you're doing a distance learning, you've got the anxiety of doing it online. The University of London is such a worldwide university with diverse cohorts. So you're meeting a lot of different people. The degree itself, it could be the career path that you're trying to go on. That could be very anxiety related. And that's all this is outside of sort of assessments and getting your results. And that is really tense, and that can get very serious. And sometimes it can get so serious that stops you from doing your day-to-day activities or even doing your schoolwork. So what should students do when they're feeling really anxious and their anxiety levels are very high?
Yeah, Carl, really good question again. And obviously, I mean, anxiety is one of the commonest mental health conditions, and social anxiety, I think we're seeing increasingly commonly in the student population. Certainly in our students who live in halls, it's one of the more commonly disclosed conditions when students are joining us. So, really important topic for lots of the students listening to this podcast, I'm sure. And I guess the first thing to say is that there is a huge difference between worry and anxiety. Worry is a normal thing that we all experience, some of us more often than others, but in general, worry doesn't interfere with the way that we're living our lives. It doesn't stop us from doing the things that we want to do and we should do. Whereas anxiety is something different. With anxiety, yes, some of the feelings may be similar to those of worry, but it stops us in our tracks. It says, no, you can't do that. You must not do that because it's not safe to do that. And I think that is when anxiety becomes a problem. And the first thing I would say is that if someone is experiencing worrying, anxious thoughts that are stopping them from doing the things that they want to achieve, then my strong recommendation is to seek professional advice about that. So, whether that's going to mean receiving a talking therapy or in some cases a medication type therapy, I think it's essential to get that professional help. And of course that can be done alongside putting in place all of the kind of general well-being promoting activities that we've already talked about today, whether it's the 5 ways to well-being or something else. And I know, lots of people find exercise, maybe HIIT, maybe swimming, maybe running, and mindfulness meditation are great for anxiety, but not all of them is for everyone, which is why it's important to get the professional help too.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a case of there are lots of physical symptoms of anxiety as well, and if that's accompanied by burnout, it may be that like a really intense workout isn't what you can do. If you're one symptom is that your whole body is in pain, you're aching, and you may not be able to get up and do a HIIT workout, and maybe, or whatever it is, and maybe what's more helpful then is a restful activity, whether that's meditating or reading or breathing deeply for a few minutes. Depending on how things are showing up for you, you'll need different things. And again, almost always a combination of different things.
Carl, I know your last question is a question that is something that's very serious, but I thank you for wanting to raise this topic for us to talk about. Would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah. So it's to do with suicidal ideation and self-harm, and it's honestly, it's a personal experience. It's not me that's been thinking about it, but it's me being in the same place as people who are thinking about it and who are self-harming. And it is a situation, as someone who is genuinely trying to help, where I'm out of my depth. There is no piece of advice, or I shouldn't be giving these people any sort of advice, because it's completely out of my depth. It's worth seeking a professional to talk to about these things. But if you're living with them, I think for me at least, the first sort of experience and to speak to them is they don't want to seek professional help. They're not in the mindset of wanting to seek professional help. That's probably why they're self-harming and having these thoughts. So it was a question just to sort of get a better understanding of what can I do in that kind of situation where I am out of my depth, and the best advice to give them is to seek professional help, but that's not the advice that they want to hear. So what can I do in that situation, maybe to help them a little bit, in the hopes that maybe then eventually they will seek that professional help.
I think the first thing to say is about being open to having a conversation and spending time with this person, because many people with suicidal thoughts actually are in a really lonely place and may feel that the thoughts they're having are so alien, so unusual, so difficult that no one else could possibly connect with them in the place where they are right now. And as someone who's helped lots of people through times of suicidal thoughts, I know that's not true, and it is possible to establish a real human connection with people, even in this really kind of dark experience that they're having. I think it's helpful if you know that you're going to need to have a conversation like that, to prepare for it in advance if you can. So have to hand what are the professional sources of advice that you might be referring them to, because it's a lot more difficult to say, well, I think you should get professional help, but I don't know where or how. And also, as part of that preparation, setting aside the time and the place so that you really can spend time to understand what the person is experiencing. I think as well, being sure not to minimise the things that they're experiencing. So, what can be really throwaway comments like, "Oh, don't be silly," or "Of course you don't want to kill yourself." They might even sound jovial, or like it might be lightening the mood, but they can be really unhelpful things to say. On the flip side of that, not being so worried that you're going to say the wrong thing that you say nothing, and that it's actually very difficult to say the wrong thing, to be honest. I think the other two things I would say are, it's often helpful to think, well, what can you do to keep this person safe for now? We're not being asked to solve all of life's problems today, but actually, what do we need to do to make sure that this person is safe right now? Because most people with suicidal thoughts don't want to die. They don't want to continue living the way that life is for them at this moment, and keeping them safe right now, even if it's until the morning when there might be a different perspective, is often the most important thing to do. And finally, just to stress again that allowing them to feel that connection to another human being, that they're not, they haven't got some kind of alien thought process going on, that they can be connected, is probably the most important thing that we can do.
To add to that, there's also this is what these kinds of podcasts are about, and the resources that we're creating in terms of challenging common misconceptions. And there are a lot surrounding suicide. And it's also worth knowing suicide thoughts are really common, but they're not spoken about much. So there's something there in raising awareness that this topic feels really private and really taboo, when actually it happens for a lot of people. And one of the misconceptions is that people who are feeling suicidal don't want help. And it's not true. So embedding that within yourself, having that knowledge that if someone has disclosed something to you and that they're feeling suicidal, there is a part of them that wants help. So if you can, have that belief. I mean, a big thing that drives me is that I believe in people and their want to heal and their want to live a better life. And like Adrian said, we don't always have the language to say, I don't want the life that I have right now, but I do want to continue living differently in another way. So being able to point that out and have that as a base understanding for yourself and for others, that it doesn't always necessarily mean someone wants to end their life. And you don't have to have all the answers. There's also, if you're caught unexpected, for example, you can suggest, why don't we look into this together? Why don't we both sit down and do a search online of crisis support lines? So you don't have to be an expert. You can just be a person with them who isn't judging them, but is there to be alongside them. So there isn't always a huge pressure to be a fixer or a rescuer. You can be alongside them and learning together as well.
There is some free interactive online training offered by Zero Suicide Alliance, it's a UK charity, but the training is accessible around the world and is completely free. It takes 20 minutes to do, and it's actually really good training, and I really strongly recommend it to anyone who might be having this conversation.
Someone might explicitly say to you that they're having thoughts of suicide, or someone might come to you in distress and say things like, I don't want to be here anymore, I want to disappear, I can't go on. And if you're concerned, ask the question, are you feeling suicidal? Because if someone doesn't feel able to say that, but that's how they're feeling, you're giving them permission, you're breaking the taboo. You're saying, this is something that we can talk about. There's a misconception that if you talk about suicide, then it might somehow influence people to take that action. It's not the case. Asking about it directly can be really helpful.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your insights and the questions, Carl, and being open with us and with our listeners about how you struggle and some of the things that you feel need to be said, and I know will help everybody that listens. We're all learning, in all content that we're consuming. So thank you, everybody, for this really great, really insightful conversation. I've really learned a lot myself. We have got some other questions from students, but before we kind of get to that, and it was talking about, we have been talking about the differences with mental health and well-being, light and shade in every facet of our lives. So when we talk about mental health, a lot of times we think it's a heavy topic, and it is serious and it is very important. But there is in this space as well that we're not just talking about struggle, we're also talking about taking care and looking after ourselves and what we can do in our lives to enhance our lives and our well-being. And I wondered, Kyle, as a student, as you know, would you have any advice or anything you'd like to share on how you motivate yourself? Any advice or encouragement that you have for fellow students around well-being?
It's gonna be hard. Let's just get that out of the way, okay? It'll be hard. No path or journey worth being on is easy. It's not gonna be straightforward either. It'll twist, it'll turn, it'll go down different avenues. It's not gonna be what you expect. Things will go against you, sometimes even your own luck. You are gonna be tested. It will be hard. It's gonna be uncomfortable, but that's just it. You should be comfortable in being uncomfortable. You know these challenges are gonna come. I just told you they would, so you can prepare and you'll be ready for them. These hurdles are just that, hurdles. They're meant to be overcome, so why fear them? They're meant to slow you down, not stop you. And that's another thing. Don't just compare your hurdle sizes to other people's. You're the only person that you need to be better than, and that's the only person you need to impress. Someone once told me, imagine writing a story about the journey you've been on. Wouldn't it be a more interesting story if you spoke about how you overcame adversity? There is a future you at the end of this that is cheering for you to get there. It's a long journey. You're in this for the long run. So take it slow. You're not in a rush, one step at a time. Even if it is just one step, even if it's the bare minimum, it's still a step. I like using the metaphor of a ladder, right? And you're trying to get to the top. There's only one way to the top, and that's to get to the top. Just keep going. Opening one door leaves 3 more to be explored. So explore them. Go. Try. Just be you. It's cringy to say, but it doesn't make it any less true. You have something to offer this world. You're good at what you do, and no one's better at being you than you. There is a payoff. There is a reward at the end for you and for the world. So don't stop. I'll be proud. The people around you will be proud. But more importantly, you'll be proud that you saw it through. You said you'd do it and you did it. You actually did it. I believe in you. Just make sure you believe in yourself as well.
My gosh, I feel so uplifted. Like,
I
yes.
was thinking I want that wording up on my wall or something somewhere, like a mantra where I can look at that.
Yeah, please start a motivational speeches YouTube channel or something.
Oh, Carl, that was amazing.
Thank you.
My last thing to do is to thank you for coming on the podcast today. It's been so great, like I said, to hear your questions and your insights. And that final, like, motivational kind of really, amazing kind of thoughts and insight into, how the journey as a student and as a human being, is for all of us. And I really, really like that bit. So I'm going to say bye for now. I'm sure Kyle, our student blogger and our supporter for Student Life at the University of London, will hear more from you. But for now, thank you so much. Okay, so we're now going to bring in some questions from other students. And these were sent to us via a form we posted on social media as part of the community support that we do on our social channels. So thank you to everybody who has submitted questions. I think we've only got time for a few now. So I'm going to start off. This is a question from David. He's studying the LLM in Papua New Guinea. And his question to the panel is, does everyone have some degree of unhealthy mental health?
Coming from a clinical background, I'm medically trained. I think definitions are really helpful sometimes. Sometimes they're not, and sometimes they are. And I think maybe in answering David's question, a definition could be helpful. So the World Health Organization definition of mental health is actually quite a positive definition. It talks about us having the ability to cope with the normal stresses of life. It talks about being able to work productively and to realise our potential. And throughout a normal life, all of us experience fluctuations in how well we feel we are dealing with the stresses of life, how productive we feel we're being, and whether we feel we're realising our potential. That's completely normal. And you could sort of see that as being well-being. Yes, you're still coping, but maybe you're not coping as well as you would like, or as well as you're used to coping. Sometimes something happens and maybe our ability to cope with those stresses falls behind what the World Health Organization was thinking when they wrote this definition. And that's when a doctor might diagnose a mental illness such as depression or anxiety or schizophrenia. Maybe you might have some treatment. And of course, then once you're on treatment, you still have the diagnosis, but you could be back up to coping with everything completely fine. And yes, okay, so now you have this label called depression or anxiety or schizophrenia or whatever else it is, but you're realising your potential, you're working great, and you're coping with all the stresses of life. So I don't know if that answers David's question. It would be great if David could be here and tell us, but I hope it goes some way.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got a question now from Amna, studying the LLB in Pakistan. And the question is, how do we keep ourselves sane while studying and grieving? And sadly, our student is grieving the loss of her mother. Georgina, could you take that?
Yeah, so first of all, so sorry for your loss and the grief that you're experiencing, especially while studying. And it's something that I resonate with. I lost my mum while I was studying at college, and it was tough. It's really tough when you go through something so significant and life-changing in that way, and you're full of intense emotions. And I'd say you need to be able to create space for your grief and accept and acknowledge that that experience is going to affect the pace that you're working at, how much you can concentrate or focus, and that's okay. That's going to happen. And what you can think about is, how do I accommodate that? So being really kind to yourself and not having the same expectations that you would if you weren't grieving. And that might mean you adjust your schedule so that you only study in short bursts, so you do little and often. Or it might mean there are times where you're studying and you want to carry on. And there's this idea in grief, which is well accepted, which is that we grow around our grief. So our grief stays the same. It's always big, but our life can grow around it. And as humans, we can and do all the time build really meaningful lives in adversity and in loss. So it could be helpful to think, you started this program. What's the wider meaning of that for you? Is that because you're creating a life that's brighter and you want to pursue more opportunities, and letting yourself have the hard days and letting yourself also have the days where you're able to do things more as you'd like to? So thinking about what you need, and also letting people know, letting your loved ones know. Maybe you've got something that you need to study for. Maybe you've got an exam that you've chosen to take. How can the people in your life help you? Could they be bringing you dinner? Could they be helping out with practical tasks? Could they be someone that you sit down with and you go through points with? Is there a space where you can talk to a professional of some kind, or get peer support like Talk Campus or wherever it is? And if you're studying at a teaching centre, for example, letting your tutors know that you're going through this if you haven't already. So it's really about being very gentle with yourself and knowing that the grief it's going to take up time and it's going to take up space.
The next question that's coming is from a BSc Accounting and Finance student, and their question is, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia at a young age, and occasionally I experience the following kind of symptoms: seeing people, patterns, objects and lights. How can this symptom of seeing people end? Because it's so scary. Your advice or recommendations, please. I'm going to come to you, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you, Jo. And what the student is describing is appears to be visual hallucinations. So that is seeing things differently than how the people around them might see things. And hallucinations are a recognised symptom of schizophrenia. And can be visual, they can be auditory, things that you hear, they can be tactile, things that you feel in your body, alongside other symptoms too. And I think all of us can appreciate how frightening that experience could be. I think the advice to someone in this situation has got to be to really keep your medical practitioner, the person, whether it's a psychiatrist or a general practitioner who looks after you and your condition, to keep them up to date with what's happening and what your experience of your symptoms is, because schizophrenia is very treatable. It's most commonly treated with drugs, with medications, and it can take some time to find the right dose and the right type of medication. But really, it's to hang on in there, let your medical practitioner know what's happening, and keep working with them until you find the treatment that is most effective for you.
So thank you all for listening, and to our guests for coming on and for talking about mental health. We really hope that it's been useful for you to hear. Remember that you can visit our wellbeing page, and that's on our student portal. And that has all the wellbeing resources and the free use of the peer support service that we mentioned, and that actually Kyle is a buddy on, and that is Talk Campus. And also within Talk Campus there is an integrated crisis support helpline, which if you need it, it is available to you 24/7, 365 days a year. So until next time, take care everybody, and thank you again so much to Adrian and to Georgina.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jo.